Hi, a pleasant day to everyone. I am Jennifer C. Jumawid, a faculty member of the Teachers College Department, University of Bohol, Tagbilaran City, Bohol, Philippines. I am showing you the map of the island of Bohol where the municipality of Baclayon is located. The locale of the study is in the municipality of Baclayon with the given GPS coordinates. It is where the oldest church in Bohol is situated. The study that I am presenting to you is entitled Perception of the Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education Implementation, Basis for Course Enhancement. The Department of Education has designed a new curriculum and later on fully implemented nationwide the K-12 curriculum. The Philippines has adopted the said implementation of the latter, thus changing the old basic education curriculum. Meanwhile, the new system requires the learners to enroll in kindergarten first before proceeding to grade 1. Alongside with this new educational system is the inclusion of mother tongue-based multilingual education policy in the curriculum, which covers from kindergarten to grade 3 only. The application of MTB-MLE adopted by the Department of Education engages the learners to begin their education in the language they understand best, their mother tongue. Since there are more than 100 dialects in the Philippines, DepEd adopted only 12 major regional languages to be regarded as the mother tongue for learning. However, as the primary medium of instruction used by the teachers and as one of the subjects taught in the classroom, MTB-MLE has faced many circumstances in both teachers and students. Furthermore, the MTB-MLE policy in the Philippines still contains conflict and ambiguity given the lack of preparation and suitable mother tongue learning materials and books. Considering its implementation, the program brings challenging situations in terms of language policies, especially on the 5 elementary schools that are involved in the study. In the case of MTB-MLE, the consideration has been given to the perspectives of those at the grassroots level, namely teachers and school administrators. The study aims to, first, assess the perception and the implementation of MTB-MLE if teachers and school administrators have given proper attention and support to implement the MTB-MLE program effectively. Second, find out the problems met by the teachers and school administrators. Third, determine the degree of difference on the assessment of MTB-MLE implementation as perceived by the two groups of respondents. Fourth, determine the degree of difference in the problems met as perceived by the two groups of respondents. Fifth, determine the degree of variance in the responses of the MTB-MLE teachers of the 5 schools on assessment of MTB-MLE implementation in terms of perception and problems met. In its theoretical framework, there were 3 main theories in language development. First in line is the nativist theory of Noam Chomsky. He believes that children in every language and cultural community learn to understand and speak at a remarkably early age. In short, it is embedded or pre-installed. Chomsky also added in his nativist theory the language acquisition device, or LAD, a hypothetical tool hardwired into the brain, and it is the ability of our brain to understand language, an innate understanding of grammar and syntax all children possess. He added that children are able to produce proper and unique language even in infancy, but they are not merely mimicking language patterns they hear. He also stated in his study that children do not acquire their language easily. However, through interrupting and listening when people speak, they manage to learn their language all the same. Second theory to include is B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning. He believes that children's language acquisition is through reinforcement. Like once the child learns how to say drink, then his mother definitely gives him a water. Thus, he would continue to do so, and the language his mother taught him will be the first language he would understand. This follows the four-term contingency. Skinner believes that it was the basis of language development: motivating operations, discriminative stimuli, response, and reinforcing stimuli. Another language theory to consider was of Lev-Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. This is a level of development obtained when children engage in social interactions with others. This theory simply states that language acquisition is associated with social interactions. It means that the language of a certain society where the children grow had a big effect on their language development. In addition to the different theories, universal grammar theory has gained wider acceptance and popularity amongst the language theories. This theory is more on L1 acquisition or first language, which is relatively related to mother tongue language. They clarified the relatively quick acquisition of L1s on the basis of minimum exposure to external input. This study utilized the purposive descriptive research design. The researchers utilized a survey questionnaire in order to obtain the needed data and responses. It was purposive since the respondents involved in the study are only the school administrators who had direct supervision of the program implementation and the elementary teachers handling MTBMLE. Further, the survey instrument was basically drawn from another study conducted by Lualhati in 2018 and was fairly modified to suit the needs of the study. The contents reflected in the assessment as to the attainment of objectives of MTBMLE was premised on the copy containing the competencies of the MTBMLE. To determine the assessment of the perception of school administrators and teachers and the problems met in the implementation of MTBMLE, simple percentage, ranking, weighted mean, and composite mean were used. To determine the degree of difference in the assessment of perception and problems met in the implementation of MTBMLE as perceived by the two groups, t-test was used. To determine the degree of variance in the responses in terms of perception and problems met of MTBMLE implementation as perceived by teachers in 5 schools, the analysis of variance was used. For objective number 1, perception on the implementation of MTBMLE of teachers and school administrators. The result shows that the assessment as to the perception of school administrators on the MTBMLE implementation was agreed, with a composite mean of 3.24. This result implies in favor. Furthermore, the assessment as to the perception of teachers on the MTBMLE implementation was agreed, with a composite mean of 3.09. This result also implies in favor. It only indicates that both school administrators and teachers agreed that the MTBMLE implementation of the basic education program in the 5 schools of Baclayon district had provided them favorable outcomes. It only shows that their positive perceptions adhere to the belief of UNESCO Bangkok in 2018 that the use of mother tongue in the child's first learning is a great help. For objective number 2, problems met by school administrators and school teachers. As you can see in the table, the result shows that the assessment of the school administrators on the problems met was moderately felt, with a composite mean of 3.20. Also, it can be noted then premise on the responses of the teacher respondents on the problems met on MTB-MLE that among 10 items, there were 5 remarked as moderately felt, 3 items remarked as extremely felt, which is reflected in the table, and the remaining 2 items were remarked as less felt. Upon computing for the composite mean, it showed that the teacher respondents' problems met on MTB-MLE implementation scored 2.89, remarked as moderately felt, which means that the problem is serious and needs action. As to the overall responses of the two groups of respondents on the problems met, both groups agreed that the problems were moderately felt, obtaining a composite mean score of 2.95. This means that the problems significantly affect the implementation of the MTB-MLE. Similar problem on learning and teaching materials was revealed as the greatest problem regarding the implementation of the MTB-MLE as exposed in the study of Eli, Go, Isidro et al. In 2015 on their qualitative assessment of the implementation of MTB-MLE at Gulu Integrated School. Borton in 2013, in her dissertation on studying the MTB-MLE top-down policy implementation from the bottom up, indicated that both teachers and parents' views of MTB-MLE focused on the short-term benefits of the policy and the long-term disadvantages. While both groups were overwhelmingly satisfied with the increase in student understanding, they expressed concern about the future implication for learning in Bicol rather than in English. The study presented gives us a proof of the expressed concern in Burton's study, as item number 8 and 7 rank 2 and 3 in the problems met by school administrators and school teachers. For objective number 3, the degree of difference in the assessment of MTB-MLE implementation as perceived by the two groups of respondents. The obtained t-value of 0.8741 is less than the critical value of 2.055 at 26 degree of freedom and 0.05 level of significance, thus accepting the null hypothesis. The results show that there is no significant difference in the responses of teachers and administrators of the assessment of MTB-MLE implementation as perceived by the two groups of respondents. Both respondents had similar assessment and interpreted the implementation as agree, which means that they were in favor, although there are some areas that need to be improved. For objective number 4, the degree of difference in the problems met as perceived by the two groups of respondents. Result reveals that the t-test computed value of 1.3679 is less than the critical value of 2.0555 at 26 degree of freedom and 0.05 level of significance. This result leads to acceptance of the null hypothesis. This means that there is insignificant degree of difference between the responses of the teachers and administrators as to the problems met of MTB-MLE implementation. This simply implies that both teachers and administrators' perception as to the problems met were similar. The ratings obtained were 2.89 and 3.0 from the teachers and administrators respectively. The qualitative remark was moderately felt. This can also mean that the problems had significantly affected the implementation of the MTB-MLE. For Objective 5.1, the degree of variance in the responses in terms of perception of MTB-MLE implementation as perceived by teachers in 5 schools. The obtained F ratio of 1.8840 is less than the critical value of 2.7955 at 4/23 degree of freedom and 0.05 level of significance, thus accepting the null hypothesis. The result revealed that there is no significant degree of variance in the response of the MTB-MLE teachers of the 5 schools on the assessment of MTB-MLE implementation in terms of perception. These results mean that the perception of the MTB-MLE implementation as perceived by the teacher respondents from the 5 schools was similar. It means that they all agree on the ground that they were in favor. This means that the implementation had satisfactory results and had met the requirements, although there were still areas that need improvement. For Objective 5.2, the degree of variance in the responses in terms of the problems met as perceived by teachers in 5 schools. The result of the F-test computation exposes that the computed F-value of 0.7179 is less than the critical value of 2.7955 at 4/23 degree of freedom and 0.05 level of significance. This basically leads to the acceptance of the null hypothesis. It only showed that there is no significant degree of variance on the responses as to problems met as perceived by teachers in 5 schools. The result means that the problems met as perceived by the teacher respondents from the 5 schools were similar. It means that they moderately felt a problem on the ground that these problems were serious and need further action, since they significantly affect the implementation of the MTB-MLE. For the conclusions, both school administrators and teachers agreed that the MTB-MLE implementation of the basic education program in the 5 schools of Baclayon District had provided them favorable outcomes. The implementation of MTB-MLE was able to meet the standards or the parameters set by the Department of Education and had produced satisfactory results, although there were areas that need improvement. The top 3 problems met are considered serious and needs actions since it significantly affects the implementation of the MTB-MLE. It is recommended that teachers should be provided relevant references or teaching learning aids in mathematics with respect to the use of MTB-MLE in the learning area. Teachers, together with the school heads, must revisit the curriculum guide, especially the learning competencies to be delivered, and subtest them if they are broad. Conduct workshops for teachers on the art of questioning for enhancement. Engage students to actively participate in the teaching learning process. Furthermore, intervention by teachers and administrators to constantly provide platforms for student participation in constructing new knowledge in English. Design and provide students activities that would develop their communication skills. Impact of the study. For HEIs or higher education institutions, results of the study will be furnished to the Human Resource Officer as baseline data for training need for MTB-MLE teachers in the Teacher Education Program course. For DepEd school administrators and teachers, implementation of the proposed improvement measure is highly recommended. Here is the bibliography. That would be all for the presentation. Thank you, and God bless us all.